Hey y'all, thanks for watching Flick Connection, where in less time than you normally spend scrolling for something to watch every night, I'm going to tell you about a bunch of unusually good movies you can catch for free on Tubi. Don't worry if you've never used Tubi before, it's totally free, it's available on any device you normally stream movies on. You don't even have to create an account to start watching these movies right away. And I've also listed other streaming services currently hosting these titles down in the top pinned comment. Thanks to Sundays for Dogs for sponsoring this video, but let's go ahead and get started with the bottom of the list, where I've got a very underrated Ray Liotta flick titled Unforgettable. This one's kind of like The Fugitive, but with a science fiction slant. Ray Liotta plays a medical examiner who's actually accused of murdering his wife, and he actually starts using a new experimental drug that unlocks memories, trying to sort out what actually happened with him and other people in the movie. This one's not a total banger, but it is kind of a forgotten gem of the 90s. If you're a fan of Ray Liotta and you've never seen this one, it's a pretty cool flick with some interesting twists and turns. As I said at the top of the video, this is an unusual list, and my next pick is one of the more disturbing movies on this list, so it's not for everyone, and it's based on a true story, making it even more disturbing. It's titled Compliance. Now, this did happen, and the basic setup is a prank caller, really awful prank caller, actually calls up a fast food restaurant and I believe some other places and pretends to be a cop. What's so terrible is he really gets into the heads of the people on the phone, and he causes these people at a fast food place to do some awful things to each other, and it really is disturbing on screen. But this movie is incredibly well directed, very well acted. But Ann Dowd as the manager of this place, this movie actually kind of reinvigorated her career. She ended up being in a lot of stuff after this, and I have no doubt it's because of how dynamite her role was in Compliance. Next up, I've got a movie that pretty accurately depicts the events of the Washington, D.C. sniper. You may remember a man and his son were hiding in the trunk of a blue Caprice, shooting people at gas stations. It was pretty terrifying stuff back when it actually happened, and they made a fairly intense drama about it. Now, this is not a high-octane movie or anything like that. It's fairly slow-paced and is really more of a performance piece, but it does give you an inside look on how this young man was groomed and kind of some of the ins and outs of how they carried out these terrible crimes. Again, this one's pretty slow-paced for as explosive as that story was. But if you're the least bit interested in learning more about that story, this is a very well done movie. Alright, next up we've got one with some of the biggest stars on this entire list, but it's actually one of the most unusual stories on a list full of unusual things. It's titled Serenity. Now, this one stars Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Diane Lane, and Jason Clarke as the bad guy. And this movie was not very well reviewed, but it's got incredible cinematography, and on the surface, it feels like kind of a standard 90s thriller, maybe a little bit of a sexy thriller. But there are some major twists at play that make this a very odd flick. I think if you go into it expecting the unexpected, you could actually have a lot of fun with this movie, even though it does have its disturbing moments. But if you go into it expecting something in particular, I can tell you right now, you're not going to get it, and you will be disappointed. I realize that's very vague, but if you generally get disappointed with the endings of movies, you may not want to take a gamble with Serenity, but if you do like big surprises, Serenity's got several for you. But then a movie that is high octane, that is just all out action, but is still got a pretty clever premise and some fantastic performances, is Joe Lynch's Mayhem. Now, Steven Yeun is the star, and he's great. I've liked him in a lot of things over the past several years, this being one of them. However, this was the first movie I ever saw Samara Weaving star in. I may have seen her in one or two other things, but my goodness, did she just light up the screen with this movie. So charismatic, and she's continued to do that in movies since. I think I've loved every character she's played since this movie, and she makes this incredibly rewatchable. The setup here is interesting as well. There's kind of a zombie virus outbreak that actually just causes people to get one bloody eye and snap and start attacking their co-workers. So the metaphor is pretty on the nose, but Joe Lynch has a lot of fun with it, and it ends up being a really entertaining flick. Now, my next one's from another filmmaker I really love, but it's the complete opposite of Mayhem. It's incredibly slow-paced, almost to the point of exhaustion, but still thought it was such a beautiful movie. A Ghost Story. Now this is definitely for the art film crowd. This is from director David Lowery, who most recently did The Green Knight, and I think A Ghost Story is maybe less accessible than A Green Knight was. But if you love artsy movies, if you love really kind of emotional stuff, A Ghost Story is an incredible ride, but it too doesn't feel like anything else you've seen before, and I was really kind of amazed at how effective it was. Now, because this one is so unusual, I will warn you again. If you don't really like slower-paced art house films, A Ghost Story is not going to be the one to win you over, but if you generally like things in that genre, again, I was kind of blown away by this flick. Okay, now for the weirdest one on a list full of weird movies, my next pick takes the cake. It's titled The Skin I Live In. In this movie, Antonio Banderas plays kind of a mad scientist type doctor who decides to take revenge on a man by turning him into a woman. That is the setup, and somehow this movie manages to be even weirder than that already strange setup. But it's very well directed. It literally gets under your skin. It's a creep out kind of a movie, but it's also got kind of a Stanley Kubrick touch to it. Everything's sort of sterile. This does go to some twisted directions that are kind of mind-blowing. I mean, this one's got some weird sex elements to it, as you can imagine, and is honestly maybe the weirdest movie Antonio Banderas has ever done, but I'm not putting it on the list just because of how strange it is. It is actually a pretty dynamite story with some edge-of-your-seat moments, and you end up rooting for the main character even though they're not a very redeemable character, meaning this movie actually kind of punches above its weight in a lot of ways. But if you're the least bit creeped out by the setup, I can tell you this one goes there. Okay, now a movie I've recommended way too many times on the channel is Mud, starring Matthew McConaughey. But my next pick is from the same director, Jeff Nichols, and it was done just prior to Mud. It's titled Take Shelter. Now, Michael Shannon stars in this, and Jessica Chastain, although she's not really in it that much. This is a slow one, but if you're interested in the setup, I can promise you there's some payoff to it. Michael Shannon plays kind of your regular guy who starts having these apocalyptic visions of storms and people going crazy. And it's so well directed, it's difficult to tell, is in his head, is something actually happening? And ultimately, even though the entire lead up is fairly slow, it is interesting, but slow paced, the payoff is well worth the wait. And you get just a dynamite performance from Michael Shannon. I mean, he's always great, but when he's in leading roles like this, his acting ability really kind of shines more so than little character roles that he does so often. So if you're a fan of his, you have to see this movie.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Now, I've got plenty more movies to discuss on this list, but before that, I do want to tell you how today's sponsor actually extended the life of our dog, Peanut. Sundays for Dogs is actually air-dried dog food that contains 90% meat, and it's human-grade meat, meaning it's safe for you and I to eat. The other 10% is vegetables with no synthetic ingredients. But what's so special about Sundays is because it's air-dried, you just store it on the shelf like regular kibble and dump it in the bowl. There's no messy cleanup, it's not going to spoil the way other fresh foods can. Sundays is made up of a short list of natural ingredients, and because it is shelf-stable, Sundays doesn't have to spend any extra money on refrigeration costs or ice packs, so they can actually save you money while also cutting down on waste. Sundays already cost 40% less than other fresh dog food brands, but right now, my viewers can save an additional 50% on top of that when they go to my link in the video description below, or just go to sundaysfordogs.com/flick. Sundays will save you time, money, it'll cut down on waste, and you know you're gonna be giving your dog better nutrition than they can get from ordinary dog food. Again, to get that discount, use my link in the description below, or just type this in right here. But speaking of great stuff, let's move on with the rest of the movies on this list. Next up, I've got a Western that actually stars Liam Neeson and Pierce Brosnan, and it too is very unusual, especially as you get towards the end, in Seraphim Falls. Now, what I love about this movie is it's essentially a chase movie. It opens up from the very beginning. Liam Neeson's character is hunting Pierce Brosnan down. And he already looks like he's been on the run for quite a while from the start of the movie, and the chase just continues, and it's excellent. However, once you get towards the third act of the movie, Angelica Houston makes an appearance, and the entire thing becomes very, very kind of surreal and unusual, and it manages to work for me. Mainly because it's so different, and I've seen so many Westerns. Had this one just gone in a predictable direction, I would have enjoyed it because all of the Western stuff was so great, but I probably would not have remembered it as much as I have, and probably wouldn't be recommending it right now. Okay, next up we've got a wild one. It does deal with some very disturbing themes, but it's also pretty accessible. It's titled Cold in July.
Stay here.
Now, this takes place in Texas in the 1980s, and it looks and feels like it. This is an edge-of-your-seat thriller. Initially, it feels kind of like a throwback. It feels kind of like a 90s movie or something, and I loved it for that. But it begins to twist and morph into something completely different and ends up being a wildly dark thriller, something that could, I think, only have come out in recent memory. It's got just a top-notch cast. I love everyone featured in this movie. I'm not even going to name them all, but let's just say Don Johnson has a pretty badass role in this on top of everyone else. Wyatt Russell even has kind of a small role that just really shocked me. Again, this can be a shocking movie, but if you love just top-notch thrillers and you're a fan of anyone involved with this movie, I can't recommend it enough. All right, Bill Paxton's got one on the list that he not only starred in, but it's one of the only movies he ever directed. It also has developed into a cult classic over the years. It's titled Frailty. In this movie, he actually plays a single father to two sons, and he begins to have visions that he believes are from God, and these visions are telling him to kill demons. Yet his oldest son notices that all of these demons his father's pointing out appear to just be regular-ass people. And yes, the movie is that dark. The oldest son is essentially trying to stop his father from becoming a serial killer, but his father believes he's been given this by God. The youngest son is all in with it, which is so dark and creepy. Again, we've got Matthew McConaughey in this movie, and it's not his last appearance on this list. The movie's really well directed and well written. It's hard to tell what direction it's going in the first time you see it, but it's edge of your seat stuff and it does a great job of holding your attention. I wish Paxton had done more things like this because I think he kind of knocked it out of the park with Frailty. And my number 5 pick being another highly, highly underrated, almost criminally underrated Matthew McConaughey flick titled Lone Star. Now, I say Matthew McConaughey movie, he does have a good role in Lone Star, but Chris Cooper really is the lead of the movie. He carries it. This is a West Texas thriller, which is basically its own genre now. If you love movies like No Country for Old Men, I cannot recommend Lone Star enough. It fits right in with all those West Texas movies, and I really don't know why this movie's not a bigger hit. I think it maybe misfired a little bit back when it was released, and to this day is just a forgotten gem that I love recommending. Tom Hardy makes the list with easily the weirdest movie he's ever been in, and by far the weirdest role he's ever done in Bronson. In this movie, he plays an infamous prisoner. In fact, one of the UK's most infamous prisoners ever, in that he would beat up everyone that they would put him in a room with, cause riots, fires, all sorts of mayhem in jail, and mainly just because he is one wild son of a gun. In fact, he just named himself after Charles Bronson because that's the type of guy he is. And the character is weird enough, but this was also directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, who would go on to do Drive with Ryan Gosling, easily his most commercially successful movie. But everything else the guy has done has this very bizarre, almost dreamlike tone to it, and Bronson is no exception. If anything, Bronson has more life and more color. It's got almost like a Clockwork Orange kind of vibe at times. But the main reason to watch Bronson is for Tom Hardy's just unbelievable performance. It's wild stuff. It's the reason he's become such a big star. In fact, there's no doubt in my mind he was cast as Bane because of how he killed it in this movie. So if you're a fan of his, Bronson is required viewing. Okay, longtime subscribers know I'm not really an anime guy. I don't recommend them often, but on occasion, I like to recommend ones that really stand out to me that I think can appeal to wide audiences, people that never watch anime. This next pick being a great example of that, Afro Samurai Resurrection. Now, Afro Samurai was originally a series. I believe it was 6 to 8 episodes. Those are all available on Tubi as well. But Resurrection is a nearly 2-hour movie that is a sequel or follow-up to the series. The animation style is absolutely breathtaking. The writing and voice work is incredible. Samuel L. Jackson has a really great role in these. The characters are all incredibly well fleshed out. And the story is just this overly epic, almost like Western type thing. I love the vibe that Afro Samurai oozes. I really wish they would do a killer live action to this one day. Typically the live action anime stuff doesn't really work out, but I feel like in the right hands, Afro Samurai would be amazing. So even if you've never watched anime movies, I still highly recommend Afro Samurai. Now, my number 2 pick is maybe the least weird movie on this list, but it does have some odd elements that I think actually elevate it and make it stand out more than most undercover cop movies. We Own the Night. In this movie, we've got Joaquin Phoenix, and it's really one of my favorite leading roles of his, Mark Wahlberg, Robert Duvall, Eva Mendes. And this is pretty classic stuff. It's got stunning, and I mean stunning cinematography, especially for a cop movie. I mean, all the locations they're in are dirty and grungy, but the movie just looks absolutely amazing. It is a total thrill ride. Joaquin Phoenix is just killer in this movie. It's one of his best sort of straightforward roles. He always does a very odd performances, and this one's kind of right down the middle, and he just nailed it. Everyone's great in this movie, and for the genre, it's rare for them to be this good. I mean, there's a lot of good cop movies, but this one is just insanely rewatchable. I'm telling you, if you've only seen it the one time, maybe twice, you could watch it again and it'll be like you've never seen it. It's that good and there's that much to kind of grab onto throughout the flick. I cannot recommend it enough, but somehow it gets topped only because my next pick is actually 3 movies. I'm labeling it the unofficial Parker trilogy. Now, Parker is a character in a series of books, and you will no doubt recognize him in one of these movies. Right now, they've got Parker, starring Jason Statham, which I tepidly recommend. It's okay, I like it. But they've also got Payback with Mel Gibson. In that movie, he's named Porter, but it's based on the same Parker books. He's playing the same character. In fact, Payback has a lot in common with my true number 1 pick, Point Blank. This one stars Lee Marvin. It's from 1967. The movie starts out with a bang. It's a little bit difficult to follow, but it's oh so cool. It's got some trippy psychedelic elements to it, and is genuinely one of my favorite movies from the 1960s. I just love the vibe of it. Lee Marvin is a total badass in the movie, much more so than you used to get from movies in the 60s, in my opinion. But you could watch all 3 of those, have a great time. I recommend them in the order they were released, with Point Blank, Payback, and then finally Parker. But that is the list. Don't forget to go check out that Sunday's link so you can get some solid food for your dog. But I'll keep making these episodes as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Tubi video, and you will see me on the next one.